Welcome everyone for this update on our portfolio performance. We all are looking very closely at Iran, the macro situation, and Tesla. With Tesla preparing for a cybercab launch, everyone is very excited, but at the same time the stock is a little bit in free fall in line with the market. Not a Tesla specific problem, but we are getting hammered. And it's very important that we take a look at our performance here at Pioneer Alpha. We are now live, by the way. You can check out our institutional products on pioneeralpha.org. There's a nice video explaining everything. And I think we are in very good shape because, as you know, I keep you updated here how Tesla performs, what my outlook is on it. And some people get annoyed by me that I talk so much about Iran and the United States and Israel and the whole war situation. I'm not doing it for political reasons or to convey any kind of opinion. I'm doing it so we can understand what's happening, predict it, and make the right trades and repositionings for our portfolios. So let's see what the outcome of that was. To recap, just very briefly, you are probably aware that the Iran situation is escalating. People are now expecting that we are seeing ground troops very soon that are being deployed. I had the feeling that this is the case 2 weeks ago. I started pivoting away from my theory, the taco trade, right, that Trump is going to withdraw the attack and stop the war. That was what everyone was expecting on Wall Street and including me. But I was one of the first ones who understood something is not right here. And it seems like we are, for some reason that no one understands, on path to an escalation with huge repercussions on the oil price and therefore on the stock markets. And we have seen that oil, let me see, it's a weekend, that oil has been hit very hard and the markets have tanked accordingly. If you look at this, I mean, I don't need to explain what that means. Here is the oil curve. It went, of course, up tremendously from 66 all the way up to 120 and so on, and is now on the rise again to 100 and then on the rise again. That has hugely impacted the markets when we look at the NASDAQ, for example. Let's take a quick look. I'm just giving you the context here before we go into Pioneer Alpha and what I did and what the performance looks like. Year to date, it has been a bloodbath for the NASDAQ, for example. We are down 10% in correction territory now for the NASDAQ. For the S&P, it doesn't look better for the S&P. Here you see year to date, well, it looks a little better. 3% better. The Dow Jones also got hit tremendously this year. Normally the Dow Jones is not as volatile, but nearly as much down as the S&P, and the NASDAQ close to 10%. That is our reference here. So that is the situation we are facing. And in times like that, it reminds me on last year, when you think about the first quarter of 2025, here, when you remember this, we went steep down even before the tariff scare. We were here, right? Here's December. You see that? Went a little bit up, but then February 14th, we went on a steep decline with the tariffs actually then hitting April 1st, but then had a V-shaped recovery. That might be a little different this year, but we are down a lot with the markets. And in times like this, it all boils down to the very important question: have we seen the bottom? That's what people thought here last week. Or is it going to get worse? And I told you that I think it is going to get worse. And when I say it's going to get worse, I have my reasons for it. This is not a fear and greed index play or a VIX play. This is a macro political play, a geostrategic play. And we hit the bottom when we hit the maximum exhaustion and risk in the geostrategic sphere. And that is not a market thing. That is a thing of Donald Trump, the Trump administration, and their decision if they want to further escalate. As long as they further escalate, and as long as new things and new damage happens to oil and the region that the market has not priced in, we are going down more. And we can go down endlessly as long as the negative surprises keep stacking up that actually add to this whole problem. And it comes all down to the oil futures, of course. I talked about this a little bit. When we look at oil futures, just FYI, I love this curve here to share this with you guys to see how you look this up. So here you see oil, crude oil, currently at 101, $101 per barrel. And you see this future curve here, May, June, July, August. These are basically future contracts that bet on what the price will be in May, in June, and so on and so forth. And what you see is this curve is the all-decisive curve because it reflects the market expectations how the Iran war will unfold in the future, or the Strait of Hormuz, whatever you call it, the oil problem. And you can see that short term, the curve went up on the front end, right? For May, it went up tremendously last trading day on Friday, 7%, while for November and December, it actually went down, which means the market thinks it's more damage short term and less damage long term. If that reverses, or not reverses, if the long term goes up also, let's say from $77 to $100 in December, it's going to be enormous pain for the markets. And this tells you what the stock market is going to do, because the change in the oil futures directly impacts the change in the stock market. So that's what we have to watch. And all of that is a function of your assessment and my assessment of Iran. That is why I hate it when people say, Joe, you said taco, I unsubscribed, you offended the president. Dudes, this is not little girls' school here where everyone can get offended. I don't intend to offend anyone. I intend to make the right predictions. And I need, good words, terms. Taco trade is an established term on Wall Street. How else am I going to say the whole theory? By the way, I don't think it's a theory anymore. So, I'm not making political statements. I'm not trying to swing someone to stop or start a war. I'm trying to predict this accurately so we can take actions. And I predicted it accurately, and I took the right actions, and that is reflected in our performance. So when you look at last week, I actually skipped the week before in updates because I was too distracted by launching the Pioneer Alpha system. Sorry about that, but we can talk about the week before also a little bit. I had a slight negative alpha. Not too much. But this week we had tremendous alpha over Tesla. This is Tesla as a benchmark, right? We can check, I didn't even check yet what the NASDAQ looks like. Look at the NASDAQ. We crushed the NASDAQ. So that tells you two things. So we outperformed, let that sink in by the way, guys. We outperformed the NASDAQ with 6.2 percentage points. That is as much as some people make in a year. And we outperformed the NASDAQ by that amount in a single week. Let's see how we did against the S&P. Similar thing, 5.12% outperformance. That is much better than a usual week for me, 3.9% for the Dow Jones. I don't know about ARK. Let's see ARK. Guys, I didn't even check that before. So we crushed ARK this week. If you invested in Pioneer Alpha, you would have made 9.54% more, more than you would have made in ARK, because we gained 3% in the portfolio and ARK lost 6.54%. Because ARK is not specialized or focused on macro, whereas Pioneer Alpha is holistic, right? We look at our 5 themes, AGI themes, but even if I get a lot of slack on X and getting, cursed by all kinds of Trump fanatics, or often also by the Trump haters, or by Israel fanatics, or by Israel haters, I don't even care. They don't understand. I'm not making political commentary. I don't care. I do care, but I don't comment on what I care for politically. I talk about the markets. And what I saw in Iran is that this will escalate. It's also going to end very badly, by the way, if it escalates. Again, not a judgment on the administration, but it's going to be a catastrophe for the markets if this keeps escalating. There is no good way out, so we need to end it soon in terms of market. And if not, we will see more pain. I took a very defensive position now. I'm absolutely at the minimum exposure right now because I don't trust it. But tremendous performance here. Of course, if you compare to TSLA, this is going to be better than Tesla, of course. But Tesla, by the way, let's talk about Tesla for a moment. We only have a 4.67% alpha over Tesla. So that's very interesting, because what that tells you is that Tesla in this week is down 1.67% last week, whereas the NASDAQ is actually down much more. The NASDAQ is down 3.2%. I don't want to overinterpret this, but that means Tesla is actually in a bullish position. The market sees relative bullishness for Tesla because Tesla should be down 6.4% if the Nasdaq is down 3.2%, but Tesla is only down 1.67%. Why is that? Probably because of April, probably because Q2 could be extremely bullish for Tesla, then that is a very interesting situation. Of course, if the market keeps being like it is, and if the escalation continues, April could also get nasty. Even though I don't think so, I think the main escalation will probably happen in the next week. And the market always tries to price in everything that comes in the future. So that is the situation. If we look a month out, we are actually not looking too good compared to the NASDAQ. We are basically on par with the NASDAQ, but for me that's pretty good, by the way, because I know Pioneer Alpha. I am the portfolio manager, so I can tell you guys how I normally position myself. And this is a very aggressive growth strategy. An aggressive growth strategy, if you manage to be in line with the market on the way down, we easily outperform the NASDAQ with many multiples of the performance. If the NASDAQ goes up 20%, I expect to be up 60%, so 3x or something. So if we can on the way down just not be worse than the NASDAQ or even be 1.5x worse than the NASDAQ, we are more than golden. That's called alpha. So this is actually not too bad. Let's see how Tesla looks like for March. We outperformed Tesla not too much. Tesla is down 10%. Pioneer Alpha is down 7.43% for March. The reason being, the week before last week I nailed it. Last week I did everything right. On Monday, when it turned green, very strongly green, because Trump said he's going to postpone it, I said right away, this is the time to get out. Because I don't trust Trump in this situation. I think he wants to go to war. I think it will deteriorate over the week. So I took very significant measures that paid off now tremendously in this week. The week before, I got caught on the wrong foot. I actually underperformed Tesla by, I think, 1.5% or something like that, because I was overexposed. I still believed in the taco trade, and of course that went south. So I actually underperformed, and that's the reason why for the month of March, Pioneer Alpha only outperforms Tesla by 2.68% and the NASDAQ not at all. Let's look at year to date. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with this performance. So we are down 11%. Tesla is down 20%, which means we outperform Tesla on relative terms 8%. I didn't check the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is probably outperforming us year to date. Yeah. So NASDAQ is down 8.38%. We measure this a little bit different than Google Finance, by the way. It all depends how you measure January 1st, the first trading day. Do you take that day into account, or do you take the day before an account? That's the difference here. So this is a normalized system. So I'm not too unhappy with this. This is still okay. NASDAQ down 8.3%. We are down 11.45% for the reasons I mentioned. We will massively outperform, in my opinion, not a promise. If you are an investor, I don't promise you anything. I'm just saying, in my experience, on the way up, it's very easy for us to outperform massively the indices. So on the way down, the plan and the objective is to not fall behind too much. So, of course, on a 6 months level, we should completely crush these people. The NASDAQ, well, not completely. On a 1 year level, how do we look on a 1 year level? Probably very good. Takes a while to load. So, why does it take? Let's see how this looks like. Anyway, I don't know why it has a loading problem right now. So what happens next? What do we do next week? I have the following strategy. We will look what happens on Monday. If we see an escalation, if we see more market slide, another 5% or something, which could absolutely happen, I think actually it's the most likely thing to happen, then we are getting into a territory, depending on Trump and the situation and how I see it, where it is time to start doubling down. If we see a green day on Monday with no significant news, I remain very skeptical. So in other words, if we go down another 5% or another 10% for Tesla, that's when I start calling a potential bottom on a fundamental level, because I think the full damage of the war is priced in. If we don't see it, especially if we see green days, I don't trust the situation unless we get significant new news that change the actual macro and geostrategic situation. If it's fake news, if Trump just says, oh, I want to negotiate, and he didn't bomb anyone, and that's because of that, it turns green, that is not enough for me. So let's see what happens. This is something where you need to follow me, unfortunately. We have to comment on the macro situation. We have another week or so, maybe 2 weeks of lots of macro we have to focus on if you guys are interested in generating real alpha at least. If you're just interested in the future and SpaceX in Tesla and NVIDIA, you don't have to worry about that, but I need to worry about it. Especially because April and Q2 are going to be potentially game changers for Tesla. So now, in the next week, in the Iran conflict, is our opportunity to generate that significant alpha that allows us to accumulate then much more Tesla shares than we could. You have to understand what these performance numbers mean that I just showed you. They mean that if I outperform Tesla by 10% or something, by 8%, it means I can buy 8% more Tesla shares. If you have 1 million in Tesla, now you have 1,100,000 in Tesla, more or less. And that is why it counts. That is why it's so important to not get creamed. I know it's very exhausting to follow all these things, and I know it's difficult if you just watch the videos. They're always delayed a day or two to actually take the right trades and not always elaborate exactly on the trading strategy because it's just too complicated. I'm just telling you, I take you on this journey because I want you guys to see how we think over here and what actions we actually take and what the results are. So my macro assessment is we have not necessarily bottomed. Be cautious with technical analysis. I never believe really in technical analysis, but especially not in situations like this where it's really about the war. It doesn't matter what the charts say. What matters is how much of the oil damage is priced in. So I want to conclude with that. If I have one tip for you, look at this thing here. Go to cmegroup.com, look at the oil futures. You click on quotes and you see that curve. And I would pick one future, literally future, December, for example, and remember this price. And if this thing, can I actually see the chart here? If this thing here, December, you see that curve. If this thing keeps changing significantly, what's the hourly here? Then you know what is happening. Daily, maybe. That's too much. Well, you see the daily is a little bit too much, but here's 2026. You saw it was basically the future for December of this year was at 55 before it started. And then you see the whole year. That's why also the markets went down slowly and then quickly. The whole year Iran was building up and the oil futures were going up all the way to the actual start of the war. So you see this very beautifully. It hit basically a bottom here and then the whole Iran stuff started with talks and carrier groups being redirected to the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. And then it went up the futures and the Nasdaq went down. And then end of February, the attack started. Boom, it spiked. Fake news down here on Monday and now back up here. And if we see an invasion, this keeps going up and this is the December oil future. Don't forget, you have to look at those. The short term are not that important. You have to look at long-term damage and what the market price is in for the oil price end of this year. For this future, December 2026. That's what I would look at. And if this thing rises significantly, it means the damage becomes much bigger for the economy. It means the Fed has to probably hike rates. It means inflation. It means all kinds of problems. That is the real question here that we have to see what happens this week. And that will determine how much damage we have. And in my assessment, if we see an escalation of the war, Iran striking back, this will rise. And then the bullhawks in the US say, oh, there will be a quick victory. More realistic people who know about the military situation say, well, no, this is just escalation. Doesn't mean the US wins quickly. It very likely means we just escalate the war and it's getting more and more damage. And that will drive these futures up. So that's what we have to watch out for. I think the good news is, even if we flush the market tries to anticipate these things and not wait. So if you see a little bit more damage, the market tries to price in much more damage. And so we can reach the bottom very quickly. And in a perfect scenario, we will reach the bottom, even though the bottom might be significantly below where it is now. We might reach the bottom exactly when Tesla actually starts to scale, which would be interesting. So that's what we have to watch out for, and that's the whole point why we are watching this closely and trying to convert these insights into alpha. I hope that was interesting. See you tomorrow.